Bears 1870 map of South Kingston on the table. So if you want to see what we're talking about, you have the visual. And if you want to steal one, you certainly can. It's quite interesting. This Bears map was the last map in which Narragansett was a part in South Kingstown. The next state map, 1895, was after. So feel free to take a look at up there, and if you want to steal one, well, we also have handouts over here. If you don't have the handouts, they're available up here, and maybe we could pass them out. Okay, you have also two handouts, and I'll be using the one I scribbled on at this, but I urge you to note that not only am I an historian, I also have become an archivist, and I've archived stuff all over the world, and I've used archives and met with archivists, and I really learned how to archive. This means that if you want to improve my history, I will be happy to help you, to show you all the archival material we have. I started out with this letter, and it got action. Letters to the editors don't always work, but this one worked. It's not exactly lengthy, 2 short paragraphs, 3 sentences, holy moly. And you're going to be seeing that I'm going to be using the term historical dead zone. Now, I have never heard any historian talk about an historical dead zone. I prefer that than the historical no man's land or the historical netherworld. But you have my phone number here, the address. I'm right across the crucifix on St. Veronica's Church in Narragansett. So I encourage you to really take a look at this. Now, my thanks to Joanne Esposito for her prompt help, John Desmond, Murray Gates, Sue Bush, thanks Sue, Jessica Wilson, my erstwhile researcher, and as a librarian at South Kingstown, Nick Edwards from the state. My text for this topic, actually you've got the text in the sheet called PR. PR not being Puerto Rico, but press release. And if you don't have them, they're up here. And so, all righty. And my goal is to get 10 of you people to join me in one of these crusades. And one is a continuation of this committee so that it can do things. The first thing we want to do is to commiserate with the Narragansetts and the Wampanoags for the Great Swamp Holocaust took place at 1675, late in the year, and it is the 350th year of that, and it basically was a horrendous Holocaust. And I'm hoping we can get that not celebrated, but commiserated. So we have a different word. I've done a lot of celebrations, but no commiseration. So come commiserate with me, the best is yet to be. So, we also want to keep this group together for activities from 1777 to 1781 in the Revolutionary War. You will see a great Revolutionary War victory right here off the shores of Point Judith. And it is totally lost to history. It was the only victory we had in Rhode Island. And in 1790, George Washington came to honor the state of Rhode Island. We joined the Union in 1790, a little late, but what can you say? But George Washington came here, and the deputy governor of Rhode Island was Samuel John Potter from Matunic, of the famous Potter family. His father was infamous as a thief, but somehow escaped. Now, happy birthday, South Kingston. I hope some of you went to Jeff Gibbs' opera last Saturday. He is going to attempt to do an opera, the whole 2-act opera on the Great Swamp Holocaust. And we hope this to be done for the 350th commiseration. This is a world event. It is probably the only world event that took place in Rhode Island. One big reason was that it had tertiary touch of Roger Williams in it. Roger Williams is a world figure, and you will find him all over the world. He is no, so if Roger Williams is involved in something, you're going to get world attention. And so we want to keep this alive. Don't forget George Washington in 1790. Now, you would wonder, why would a URI professor of accounting be doing this? My area of expertise in accounting and research in accounting was accounting history. And accounting history is 99.99% like any other history, except it doesn't sell as well. There is a limited market, but a market nonetheless. Now, over these last 50 years, I have done 36 different events, celebrations, starting with the 75th anniversary of the State Society of CPAs, going through a world event with the World Congress of Accounting, which was a fun world event. So I had a lot of experience, and in so doing, I have learned to be a marketeer. And I found I was a better marketeer probably than an accountant. But if you want to be successful in history, you have to market it. And one thing I have learned over these years is how to market history. Make it interesting, and I hope you will find this interesting as well. Now, I don't think anybody here remembers the radio show 20 Questions. My brother and I were cursed. We didn't have television until 1959. So we had, as Al Smith said, the radio as our chief guide. And one of the great shows of the 1950s, Robert Q. Lewis, 20 Questions. Anyone ever remember the 20 Questions? Bill, thank God that some would admit that he's as old as I am. So I decided to do the game there: persons, places, or things. And what you have here, I'm playing Robert Q. Lewis. And first we always, and what you would do, the panel would say, is it a person? He would say yes, and then you had 19 more questions to find who the person was. It was a great show. And so I picked the people. That's what an historian does. The historian picks the places, the people, and the stages, and has to be willing to have criticism about his or her choices. But in academics, everything is done by iteration. You try to iterate and gain knowledge. And so I don't expect this to be a perfect world. It is work. It is possible that one of you people would say, hey, you really could have done a better job. And I would say, iterate it, baby, iterate it, so that we could take it. We start with, and by the way, historians get to know the people they write about. They become bosom buddies. And so you'll find that you get to know them as people. And if you have a chance, when we settle the Narragansett Historical Society building next on Clark Farm, we have the Hitchcock collection, which came in unbeknownst to me, but I was archiving everything, and I said, look at this archive. And by chance, I had bought another part of the archive for $28, 45 hardback photos of the 1850s and 60s. Then I finally got a hold of the wonderful lady that donated them to us, and she came back with another shipment. So we have a shipment of post-Civil War Narragansett that is absolutely astounding. And you just can't believe it. Hitchcock, it was the Hitchcock collection. Hitchcock was Brown 1869. That's significant because it ties in with his buddy Nathan Fellows Dixon. This was no accident that Narragansett split from South Kingstown. There was the buddy system available. And again, if you don't have it, we have copies up in front. It's like the old lectures. People don't want to get close to the teacher. He went to Columbia Med School, graduated in 1872, and founded two practices, 6 months, the summer months in Narragansett Pier, 6 months in New York City. He was a society doctor. He also was an activist, a tremendous activist. His brother was a relatively famous painter, Impressionist painter, George Hitchcock, and we have a couple of pictures of his work in the archive as well. Now, his most famous patient, if you will, was McKim, of McKim, Mead, and White, America's most famous architectural firm. Even today, perhaps better known than Frank Lloyd Wright. Part of it was the fact that White got killed in New York, murdered in New York City by a grieved husband, but you get fame anyway. But we have this magnificent collection. They lived in the Hopewell Cottage, which is right next to the reading room, which is now Lila Dellman's firm. Hitchcock built the life-saving station, which is now the Coast Guard House. He was that well connected, and of course, McKim, Mead, and White built the Narragansett Casino after the Newport Casino. So it's quite a show there. That's one of the people. The next guy is William C. Clark Sr. There was a William C. Clark Jr. that sort of died on me with no obituary. But William C. Clark Sr. was a great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandnephew of John C. Clark, the person who negotiated the 1663 charter that set up the state of Rhode Island again. So if you go to the State House, just outside the House of Representatives, there is this magnificent charter of 1673 signed by Charles II. And if you look up to the left, you find the best portrait in the State House, my buddy, William Sprague, who was the second William Sprague. His nephew, his uncle was governor, senator, and representative from Rhode Island. William Sprague was just governor and senator from Rhode Island, but he became my buddy. But take a look at the State House, truly beautiful. Nathan Dixon III, you see his bio in the handout. And if you don't have them, maybe somebody will share it with you. They were very famous in Westerly, the Dixon Hotel, the Dixon House. His papers are at Brown, along with the other two. I haven't had any help from Brown on this. Now, these are interesting people, but you see a connection. There were probably 40 people that graduated from Brown in 1869, like nobody. And these people had to know each other. And do you think it was an accident that Dixon becomes on the Judiciary Committee that sits on the split? Excuse me, I doubt it. Others. Roland Hazard is the elephant in the room. I really thought William C. Clark Sr. was the mouthpiece of Roland Hazard, but all research I have done has indicated that William C. Clark was his own person. H.C. Havemeyer, the founder of American Sugar, had a summer place in Narragansett. We're going to see this mysterious guy, George Sherman, from Gould. I'm told there are still Shermans in Gould. And so this is another possibility for research. The hotel owners were significant, and of course they were really the leaders. They tied in with Hitchcock, Clark, and the hotel owners wanted to get the hell out of South Kingstown. And so we do places, and we have villages. Luckily, we have a handout, and you might want to steal it. I really will close a blind eye to it. Such a blind eye is already closed. But the villages are there, and we're going to be looking at them by different stages, and that's the next handout. Now, we also have Narrow River and the Great Salt Pond. These are the three places I chose. Now, the beauty of history research is you again would say, you forgot this, you dummy. And many people say that in a journal article, even though the editor sometimes doesn't permit that. But now the things, which is a catch-all for Robert Q. Lewis in Persons, Places, and Things. The Narragansett Pier Improvement Association, the Narragansett Pier Railroad, social connections, and that's okay. Don't have me repeat that page. So the social connections are giant. If you were a Charles Hitchcock or McKim, or these other people who really spent a great deal of time in Europe. A beautiful photo of Hitchcock in the 1871 Paris World's Fair. If you have a chance, take a look at the Hitchcock collection. It is really astounding. You go like, huh? And there are playlists in there. Narragansett was quite the community, and you could see it having a different feeling than South Kingstown. The newspapers, the Narragansett Times, thanks to Sue, we have a key event history of the Narragansett Times, and I use that, but we take Narragansett history from 1800 all the way to 2022 in a chronology of key events. And that is available on the website, thanks to Sue. Thank you, Sue. And so we have this. We have, of course, the hotels are all gone, even the Green Inn, the last one. And we have things like railroad stations. Now, the time periods, let's make sure I'm on topic. Yeah, perfect. Not a perfect talk, but I'm on perfect time. We do the stages, and these are always interesting. Stage one starts out, and again, I'm using the Narragansett Times. Now, if there is an extant minutes book of the Narragansett Pier Improvement Association, I'd love to see it. But I'm relying on the next best thing, the Narragansett Times coverage. And in 1881, it is founded, September 81. And again, unfortunately, at my house, I have each of the items in the archive photocopied by 36 topics. If you want to take it out of my house, please do. But, so the time periods, you could call them stages, if you will. We start in 1881. All of this can be followed in the archive, Elections in Government. So each of these comes from an article in the Narragansett Times. And the big thing is roads. The tourists, want to ride or drive or walk close along the margin of the sea. If the pier prospers, all the neighborhood around cheers. Now this is going to be a key sentence later on, when William C. Clark tries to grab Peacedale, Wakefield, and Rocky Brook from South Kingstown. There is a drama here that is beyond belief. Now, William C. Clark called this Front Street. You might remember the song, since Bill remembers Robert Q. Lewis, you might remember, give me land, give me land, give me lots and lots of land. Don't fence me in. And this ultimately is a land power chess match. And that's what it is. These stages are war. And there are also chess matches, feelers, pincer movements. And stage two was the goal of having Narragansett Pier become Old Orchard Beach. Now, I do have a warning for you. I did spend 4 years in Maine. I request that you go into the ocean at Old Orchard Beach very carefully, with about 18 pair of socks on, because it is cold, even by Maine standards. Old Orchard Beach separated from Saco, Maine. and assumed the dignity of an independent town. It has made improvement. They built sidewalks, new places of amusements, electric lights. So Narragansett Pier wants to try that. It's like a pincer movement. You know, you have a movement, and if there's activity and you seem to be gaining ground, you stay with it. It appears that the water was quite cold in Narragansett, and like Old Orchard Beach, it didn't go. But the next part of it, if we can't be separated, we can at least build a road. And of course, you started then Point Judith Road, Ocean Road, and macadamized the roads up to Dunn's Cottage. And you can understand why Dunn picked it. I mean, it's all a game here. Dunn, the bosom buddy of Chester Arthur, the president who succeeded after the assassination of Garfield. He was the only sitting president to come to Narragansett. And I would have loved to have been at that great party that Dunn threw at Dunmere. It must have been quite something. So you play this game. We raise $8,000. South Kingstown gives us of that amount $13.25. Boy, you are a pike of South Kingstown. So you can see there's sort of a feeling of negativism there. R.G. Dunn gave $1,000. He would be the founder of Dunn and Bradstreet. He was at that point a sole. He had his own firm without Bradstreet. Roland Hazard gave $1,000, and he again is a mystery figure. H.O. Havemeyer gave $500. So you see people giving. So finally, in stage 3 in 1885, there's an admission. The committee on the removal of the railroad station, which did happen, and the division of the town. So this was the first note I had that there was such a subcommittee of the Narragansett Pier Improvement Association. You know, historians would love to get the minute books, but you know, minute books are kind of hard to find. But if you were to find the minute books of the Narragansett Pier Improvement Association, it has had various lives in Narragansett. It comes up every 20, 30 years. You'd have a find there. Stage 4, another pincer movement. And this one really, you have to be subtle about it. The two drives that divide the attention of our summer guest in popularity are the road to Matunic Beach and up through Little Neck to Narragansett Ferry with the objective point of an excursion through the old Robinson Mansion. And I'm dying to get into the old Robinson Mansion, but I'm not, of course, going to break in yet. But that at one time was a huge tourist site. Hannah Robinson, of course, was quite famous but also this was an attempt to capture Matunic. Because if you captured Matunic, you captured all the coast. And then you would get rid of that little thing going into the Great Salt Pine and Matunic, like a little opening that was closed. That was the result of the gale of 1815. There was already talk of having a breachway, and obviously people were in it. Once the breachway is there, wow, have you got something if you control Matunic. The goal was, surprisingly, to get a railroad line there, the Grand Trunk Line, to bring goods in from Europe and ship them all the way through Canada. It never happened, but it was a goal. Stage 5 in 1887 occurs before the Rhode Island Senate Judiciary Committee. And guess who's on it? Nathan Dixon III of Westerly. Now, this guy, I'm assuming, is a bosom buddy of Hatfield. There were only 40 graduates in the 1869 class at Brown, and there were like 12 at MIT. So we had a leadoff by William C. Clark, who shoots for the moon, if you will. He's not just wanting Narragansett Pier and Point Judith. The interests of the villages of Wakefield, Peacedale, and Rocky Brook are manufacturing, but the buildings and improvements made at the pier have given nearly, if not quite as much, towards support, particularly during the winter months, to carpenters, masons, and other mechanics. William C. Clark was a grabber. The Clark Block is still in Wakefield. Unfortunately, the Clark Block in Narragansett was torn down during the movement by Royal Little. But William C. Clark is a real magnet here. And then we have somebody, I hope, do we have any Shermans here? Sherman, not the German Sherman, George P. Sherman of the General Sherman said, not from Gould, if there was, and he really should have said were, to be any division between the Great Salt Pond, and it is a Great Salt Pond, and Narrow River, it should be on a line through the center of the pond and the river to the North Kingstown line. This came out of the clear blue moon. And it happened that way, even though Gould did not seem, maybe not Gould, Sherman didn't seem to be a great player, but he hit it square on, if you will. Stage 6, we had a meeting at the Providence State House, and again, the stress is to capture Mattoonic. If Narragansett had captured Mattoonic, just think what we would have had in terms of the shoreline. And so this is a movement in war. William C. Clark is for it. The opposers were quite unhappy. Daniel Whaley of Wakefield. And again, I have all of this information in my archive under the topic election and government from the Narragansett Times. The Narragansett Times wanted the split. The Narragansett Herald did not want the split. And if you ever want to see two newspapers from the same community differ, here is an example. It was much like the Washington Post and the Washington Times. When I was with the federal government, we used to check things out in the Post and the Washington Times for background, political background. And you would say, how could this event be happening? And one paper says it's good, the other paper says it's bad, and they cover completely different topics. So this grab, Whaley says poor people paying more taxes. And of course, this is the wealthy part of South Kingstown. And poor people pay more taxes. Benjamin Curtis says Rocky Brook is 100% against it. Thomas Gould of Gould said, you want to give them Wakefield? Wakefield has the town hall. It has the poor farm. This was a gift of Roland G. Hazard. How can you give this to Narragansett? And so Van Slick, and he was quite slick, to say the least, even though he spelt his last name V-A-N-S-L-Y-C-K. He was one slick dude. He was representing the people who wanted to split. He was the city solicitor of Providence, and he comes up with this compromise. The question of representation in the legislature seems likely to be a turning point, i.e. if Narragansett was a town rather than a division, it would have a senator and a representative. That meant Providence would lose a senator and a representative. It's a very skewed system that gave all sorts of powers to small towns. But anyway, but those who favored division, now that's what 1888 was a division, not a separate town. The town took place in 1901. But we're willing to waive such rights if necessary to give them the right to govern themselves. He is really slick. And so we became a district rather than a town, even though we were totally self-governing. We just shared a rep with, and a senator with South Kingstown. Now, an editorial in March of 1888, South Kingston, leaving a large part of the people in the old town devoted to agriculture, and that's what it would have done if you look at the map. It was quite a grind. So finally, and this is the mystery part of it, stage 7, because there are no records here. Once in a while at the Rhode Island State House, you find hearings and records. But this was a deal, and you knew Van Slick and Dixon were in the deal, along with his buddy, the buddy Hitchcock. So we split. Narrow River was split, and that meant all of South Pier, South Ferry, became part of Narragansett. It was like a, huh? But if you split Narrow River in half, this is what you get. And the split of Point Judith Pond was not at the proposed breachway, but at the old breachway. And that's why you have Jerusalem in Narragansett. Because if you split it in half on the old breachway, and the map is the old breachway, all of a sudden you find that Jerusalem is in Narragansett, which it never should have been. So the split was done, not all of a sudden, surprise, surprise. Now why care? And that's a good question. I must admit, thank you for coming. You probably care about history. I see history as a great commercial driver. And for instance, I'm trying to sell Friends of Canachet Farm on a trail, not just in Canachet Farm, but all the way up through the hill, which is a federal property, and across, and hence you get one of the greatest walks in the history of the world. Now, while the percent of people in the U.S. very interested in history is continuing to decrease, we've got to admit this. We can tell by the history majors, history courses. We can tell by, of course, I am a first-generation American, so I want to be careful about aliens because they were my parents. But you can see a different mix of people coming in. The historical base, though, is still a significant market. But still, history needs to be marketed. And what this talk is History Marketing 102 lecture. And I have been successful marketing history. And the best example was in 2013, the 125th anniversary of Narragansett splitting from South Kingstown, of which there was one person interested in the town doing something. That person was me. I tried 8 times at various meetings to get the town to form a committee. And finally, one day, my buddy Chris Wiggles says, I'm sick and tired of you talking about it. You can have your committee. And all of a sudden, I was joined by, I can't believe the number of people calling me up and saying, I want to be on the committee, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I'm saying, where were you all those years? I would be up there sort of like, what is this fool talking about again? So it's a market, but you have to market it. History does build an intellectual history, intellectual interest. History can break through the curse of immediacy, which is getting more and more out of control, which I must admit, our last 2 presidents were on the immediacy side. And you want, hopefully, to have debate, studies done like this, studies looking at the historical dead zones of these various towns so people get interested in it. And past ideas that work, that was my money maker in accounting. I specialized in past ideas that worked but had been forgotten. And I hit one. It was like hitting the big split. Now, what has been lost to both Narragansett and to South Kingston historical histories from 1723 to 1880. This is just an example. Now, you could call it the historical dead zone, but which I use. I guess I like that one. A no man's land, historical Netherland. The history of the split is only known by me, and you people now are up on it. And just wait for the next quiz show, and you're going to make a fortune. However, I will tell you that we had a major Revolutionary War victory that probably none of you people know about off the coast of Point Judith, where the lighthouse, we think where the lighthouse is now, but then it was just a burning embers. The Battle of the Siren and 2 other smaller ships were captured when they went on the rocks. And the leader of South Kingstown was my buddy Samuel John Potter. And he was joined by North Kingstown, which came in, and a mystery town in Mass, which I am now assuming must be Bristol, because Bristol could see all the activity that was going on at the sea there, but I still haven't found the thread. We have the names of the people, but we don't have the town. And at that point, Bristol was in Massachusetts. So we have Samuel John Potter, the greeter of George Washington in 1790, when Potter was deputy governor of Rhode Island. The Siren, the gale of 1815, which I've spent much time with, and with John Boothroyd, unfortunately deceased. The South Ferry's got a tremendous history, and that has been looked at. The Hannah Robinson House, I want to get in legally. There will be no illegal action taken here. But if you do break in, let me know. Now, we have Tucker's Dock or Monahan's Dock. Newport and Narragansett were connected by ferries, and hence we had complete movement between Newport and Narragansett, which would have pleased both Hitchcock and McKim. No, I've done, Chester Arthur was here. Now, I must admit, Chester Arthur isn't the world's most significant president, but he looks good compared to the last couple of presidents we had. And, but he came to Narragansett and feasted at the Dunmere. And I would have loved to get the menu. That it must have been a spectacular menu, to say the least. We've talked Southbury, Hannah Robinson, because I've spent a great deal of time with Kate Chase, Sprague Chase, the first wife of Governor William Sprague, who was the nephew of the first Governor William Sprague. A little bit of incest here, to say the least. Irving Wharton in the Narragansett Herald is just spectacular because he hated, absolutely hated Roland Hazard and would do anything to block the split. So as a result, the Narragansett Times is silent about the split until it happens, whereas the Narragansett Times is reporting what happens. So you see an interesting thing. I think the Narragansett Herald reported Chester Arthur, but the Narragansett Times didn't. So William C. Clark Jr. is quite a dynamic figure. And we know much about him. He is the chief mouth here, and the risk taker, the gambler, I wouldn't say the brains behind the output, at least the mouth behind the split. And George P. Sherman, we had Lafayette visit the Robinson house on his way to visit General Rochambeau in Newport. And there is Lafayette memorabilia in the house. And I think I'll break into it tonight. But don't tell anybody. George Washington was here to meet Rochambeau, took the South Ferry to Jamestown to Newport. And the conclusions: we should give Jerusalem back where it belongs. There was an attempt in 1983 at the Narragansett Town Council to give Jerusalem back to its rightful geographic owners. Maury Luchins, my fellow countryman, made the motion. It got 1 vote, Luchins' vote. Well, at least it's consistent. And 4 votes against it. We got to know more about George P. Sherman. The Sherman relatives, I mean, they are supposed to still be in Gould. I just can't remember where Gould is, but there is a map that would tell me. Dr. Charles Hitchcock and Nathan F. Dixon III, there's clearly a lot of dealings that must have gone on there, and whether they're recorded or not, I doubt it, but the Dixon papers of all 3 Dixons are at Brown. Let's face it, if we use Dr. Hitchcock, and he became a buddy, it's one of the greatest things about doing histories. People become your friends. They may have been dead 100 years, but they become your friends. And Hitchcock has become a friend. And would you rather have Narragansett part of a little village like Usquophog, or would you rather be separated? Even though Usquophog is a nice place, and if anyone here is from Usquophog, please don't shoot me. No, I love to go to London to study the archives. Lastly, end with this call, and I just about right near the end of the talk, which we are near the end of the talk. John has heard this before. I still got it, John, lecturing. You do? Yeah, I do. I had it years ago, and I love to lecture, even though it's supposed to be a low-level means of teaching. People tell you that who can't lecture, and they just say, how dare you lecture, especially about a town. Anyway, join in, call for action, join in, take the lead, you can do this. I want, and I'm sorry, I don't know if the Secretary of State's people are here or not, but I want a petition. This is primarily for the Great Swamp Holocaust, from sympathizing with the Wampanoags and the Narragansetts for what we did, what the European settlers did, not my relatives. I don't know who they were killing, but so the Rhode Island governor, we want the Rhode Island Senate to make a proclamation, Rhode Island House, South Kingstown Town Council, Narragansett Town Council, the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and we want a stamp. I made a stamp for the Narragansett 125. Memorable, no, in fact, I didn't really draw it. It was drawn by Ted Wright's granddaughter, I think. Beautiful job. And I actually had the post office in Wakefield print it. And that's what we want to have, because people love stamps, and you can create your own stamp. You just have to go through a procedure with the post office. You can print 50, I don't know how many sheets we printed, but they really went. They were very popular. We have, hopefully coming, inshallah, I've been working with the American Indian Museum in here, but also the Tomahawk Museum. It's going to be relocated at the old Sherman Farm on 138, hopefully. And with my background in the Middle East, I always use the term inshallah. If Allah wills it, you get it. If Allah doesn't will it, you don't get it. We've got to do something with the siren. We've got to recreate an interest in Samuel John Potter, who was an immense figure. We hear about his cousins, Elisha Reynolds Potter Sr., Elisha Reynolds Potter Jr., but not Samuel John Potter, and this is a shame. Okay. And George Washington was here, as well as Lafayette. So, which is 57 minutes, which isn't bad. So we have time for questions. If you want to ask questions, or you could come up here and ask the question so everybody could hear it, especially me. Have any questions?